speeches. And it's a good thing that Fiona and her wisdom has saved the best for life. Best for last. I often tell Felix...
that's the Eton speech.
Wait, let's go in a second. I often tell Felix, my eldest son, one of two, that children are a bit like pancakes. Right? When you make English pancakes, all these thick ones you have here, the first one you make is rubbish, and you throw in the bin. And it's for the second one that they get good. And, you know, that was true in our family too. So, before I start, I just want to say a couple of things, a few words of thanks. Most of all to Andrea and Jeremy and to Sophia. For their hospitality for this party, but also putting them up here. I've been sensible. I'm sleeping in a party house. No night bus for me. But most of all, I want to thank them for making me feel so at home by having a house that is on Eaton Street. And just to show that I'm not the only one to have been to privileged institutions. This is from the parent. It's the famous King's scarf.
Now I deserve it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get historical. I'm getting political. Phil there was sort of banally cultural on 1969. I'm going to talk a little bit more about 1969 in a serious way. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. These words were not used to describe the year 1969, 50 years ago, but they could have been. And I want to take you back, okay? Those of you who remember, Phil and others, and you'll be with me here. Alec. The year has got off to an ambiguous start. Already on the 2nd of January 1969, while most of the world is nursing a 2-day New Year's hangover, marchers under the banner of People's Democracy set out from Belfast to Derry, or Londonderry, demanding greater rights for the Catholic population of Northern Ireland and for the unification of the island of Ireland in a socialist republic. A peaceful demonstration that marks the beginning of the civil unrest, terrorism and military repression that will subsequently be called the Troubles. Meanwhile, on the same day in London, Australian press mogul Rupert Murdoch completes his purchase of Britain's biggest selling Sunday paper, The News of the World, thereby lighting the long, slow fuse that will eventually result in Brexit.
The long game.
By 1969, the enthusiasm of the student movement has begun to wane. The optimism of les événements of May 1968 has already soured. In January, in Madrid, martial law is declared and over 300 students are arrested. On the 16th of the same month, the student Jan Palach sets himself on fire on the steps of the National Museum in Prague in protest at the Soviet occupation of his country and the crushing of Premier Alexander Dubček's reform movement. In February, in Cairo, Yasser Arafat is elected chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. In March, Golda Meir becomes the first female Prime Minister of Israel. This is for you guys. I chose this one especially for you. Wikipedia is your friend. Help me out with this one. In May, the Montreal Canadiens defeat the St. Louis Blues to win the Stanley Cup, repeating their success of the previous season. Jim Morrison of The Doors is arrested on charges of indecent exposure. And this one is for John and the other Latin Americanists. And a general strike breaks out in Cordoba, Argentina. In June, Brian Jones, drummer of the Rolling Stones, drowns in his swimming pool at Cotchford Farm, Sussex. The United Kingdom and Rhodesia sever diplomatic relations, and the Stonewall riots signal the beginning of the modern gay rights movement in the US. In July, Tom Mboya, Kenyan Minister of Development, is assassinated. The football war breaks out between Honduras and El Salvador. and Prince Charles is invested as Prince of Wales at Carnarvon Castle. And so, finally,
The stage is set.
the stage is indeed set. As the year surges and crescendos, tortuously and convulsively, in those same pangs that Phil has described, 1969 enters the month of August, the cruelest month. See, I can do my literary reference. That was a joke. And on the 9th day of that month, as the stars enter their fateful alignment, an event occurs. Momentous, portentous, an event that we are here to celebrate today. The death of the German sociologist, philosopher, and founder of the Frankfurt School, Theodor Wiesengrund Adorno. Meanwhile, far away from Frankfurt am Main, in Wrexham General Hospital in North Wales,
Wrexham
John has a
Milo.
legitimate
Wrexham
claim.
Milo.
Wrexham Milo,
Thank you.
absolutely. There's a legitimate claim, like me, to support the Great Welsh Rugby team. By caesarean section, or Kaiserschnitt, as Adorno would have said. The man before you was born, Jonathan Paul Beasley-Murray. Okay, so we got there in the end. John. What can one say? In the spirit of the word cloud, I asked my children,
Oh, God.
Felix and Clara, 13 and 10. John's nephew and niece, or two of his nephews and nieces, for their view. And this is what they said. Inconspicuous, tolerant, shy. These words, they said, describe John least well. And the words that do describe him, you ask? Ironic, teasing, unpatronizing to children, generous, sardonic, mysterious, and pirate. Indeed, when they were younger, both children actually thought he was a pirate. And as for myself, well, speaking from the heart, the truest thing that I can say to John is that he's always been like a brother to me. Now, Fiona, in her wisdom, saved the best for last. And I'm very glad for all the other wonderful speeches, particularly to Alec, because you said all the bad things for me. There's no doubt that John is a complex character, full of contradictions. A difficult friend, perhaps. Certainly a difficult brother. And I want to describe some of these contradictions. So on the one hand, I mean, we're getting dialectical. Adorno is running through this. On the one hand, at a strikingly young age, John essentially entered adolescence at the age of 9. I wish him and Fiona much luck with David. He decided that he didn't want to be part of the family very much. He took violent, if legitimate, objection to the religious and middle-class values of his parents. Staking out a social and political identity all of his own. On the other hand, here's a contradiction. John's loyalty to his family, his sense of family, is phenomenal. So much so that when there are family celebrations like this one, a 70th birthday or something in Britain, John's surprise visits are no longer surprised, indeed they are expected. And more seriously, Jon is often there at moments of a crisis or difficulty for someone in the family, making his way across the Atlantic and across the Rockies in a way that speaks less in words. The words are often still sardonic and teasing, but more through actions. Similarly, another contradiction, as others have already mentioned, Jon is famously rude. Shark boy, says the wise young Maya. Well, my friends as teenagers and students, they had a nickname for Jon. They just called him Pod, P-O-D, Prince of Darkness. And yet, on the other hand, Jon is remarkably, surprisingly, considerate and thoughtful, never missing a birthday, never forgetting to send one of his legendary thank you cards. Yes. And my present is a box of thank you cards. And a pen with which to write on them. And actually some cartridges. Oh my God. And no doubt you will need to send some of these after today. Behind these contradictions is probably a person who I think you'll agree, with his relentless energy, his dynamism, helps keep the world going round, who doesn't allow any of us to sit still and comfortable, with a dynamism, a passion, challenging, infuriating, questioning, that keeps in touch with life as an open, important process. A dynamism and passion that makes lots of people want to be his friend, that brings people together, and ultimately, although I didn't have much choice in the matter, makes me feel privileged to be his brother. In the course of the past 50 years, 48 of which I've known him, Jon has never lost these qualities, has never ceased to be full of contradictions, never ceased being a difficult friend, brother, and probably, since I'm representing the family, a son. But it's certainly true that in the last 10 years or so, some things have changed. It's not that Jon has become soft and soppy in his middle age, but something of Pod has slipped away. In a way that I imagine is a relief to Jon himself, as much as it is to others around him. This is what we in the family, behind his back, sometimes call the new Jon. A new Jon who is perhaps a little more relaxed, a little more easygoing, a little more, dare I say it, tolerant. Here, of course, I'm talking about the time that Jon and Fiona have been together, and Fiona, it's wonderful to have you in the family and to see the happiness that all of you with Sophie and Theo have built together. But it's not just Sophie and Theo. A large part of this has to be David. And Jon is, as we all can see, a magnificent father to a wonderful boy. Although even here, in institutions such as Literacy Hour, it's good to see that Jon's intellectually challenging nature is still at work. And Jon is also a fantastic uncle to his nephews and nieces, Felix and Clara, but also my sister's children, Rafi and Jemima, and newly to brother Benny's Agatha. Jon is to them a complex, contradictory uncle, an uncle who is sardonic, teasing and mysterious, but always generous, never patronising, an uncle who is much loved. Yes, we all live, whether as friend or as family, with Jon and his wonderful, infuriating, life-enhancing dynamism, ambiguity and contradictions, but we love him all the more, both despite and because of them. And, as Adorno said, intolerance of ambiguity is the mark of an authoritarian personality. So let's end with the toast. Happy Death Day, Theodor Adorno. Happy birthday, Jon.